Hello and welcome to Wisdom and Wealth, a channel dedicated to helping those over 40 navigate life's complexities with clarity and purpose. On this channel, we discuss topics that are relevant to your lives, helping you to achieve both inner peace and financial well-being. When we talk about healing the mind, we aren't simply referring to some abstract, poetic notion of inner peace. We are talking about something very real, something foundational. The mind, quite literally, is the starting point of every journey in your life. It is the filter through which you perceive the world, the generator of thought, emotion, and ultimately, your identity. If that starting point is wounded, unclear, or fragmented, then your perception of reality will be too. And the insidious part is that most people don't even know they're carrying around a fractured lens, viewing everything through a distorted view. Your mind is constantly creating narratives. It tells you who you are, who others are, what the world is, what's possible, and conversely, what's hopeless. These stories then become automatic, ingrained, and seemingly unchangeable. Remember to like or subscribe to the Buddhist Doctrine channel for more insights like this. You don't consciously choose these narratives. They are inherited, shaped by your earliest experiences, your environment, your culture, and, most significantly, by your pain. If you were neglected, abandoned, betrayed, or even simply misunderstood as a child, your mind doesn't forget that. It adapts. It creates patterns of thought designed to protect you from further harm. However, those same patterns, if left unexamined, can imprison you for life, continuing to cause problems, even if they are no longer needed. Let me give you a tangible example. A child who was never truly seen or validated by their parents may grow up constantly seeking approval from others. Their mind develops a core belief: I am only valuable if others accept me. Now, this isn't a conscious choice or a deliberate decision. It's a deeply ingrained survival mechanism, rooted in the need for connection and acceptance. This is an important point, so remember to like or subscribe to the Buddhist Doctrine channel for more. As that child becomes an adult, that belief operates like a silent program running in the background. They might build a career, cultivate relationships, even craft a public image, all driven by this unconscious need for validation. But underneath it all, that child is still trying to resolve a wound that was never properly healed. This is precisely why we emphasize that healing the mind isn't a luxury, it's a responsibility. An unhealed mind doesn't just affect your personal happiness or your sense of well-being. It profoundly impacts the quality of every decision you make, every relationship you enter, every risk you avoid or pursue. A mind left in a state of chaos inevitably creates a life that mirrors that chaos. Philosophers, from the Stoics to Carl Jung, have consistently pointed to this fundamental truth. Jung famously stated, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Think deeply about that statement. The things you believe are simply the way life is, may not be true at all. Maybe they're simply the way your mind is. And if that's the case, then the power to change your life begins with the courage to confront your own mind. But here's where most people stumble and falter. Confronting the mind is, undeniably, uncomfortable. It means facing not only the pain of your past but also your own complicity in perpetuating it. It means owning your deeply ingrained patterns, not as shameful defects, but as valuable clues. Clues that tell you where you've been wounded, where you've adapted, and, most importantly, where you now have the power to heal and transform. And yes, that power resides within every single one of us, regardless of age or background. If this has helped you so far, like or subscribe to the Buddhist Doctrine channel. Healing the mind requires two fundamental things: awareness and responsibility. Awareness is the ability to observe your thoughts and feelings without identifying with them, to see them as passing phenomena rather than absolute truths. Responsibility is the willingness to deliberately, patiently, and persistently change those thoughts and feelings when they no longer serve you. It's not about pretending everything is fine or engaging in toxic positivity. It's about consciously choosing not to be governed by the parts of you that were formed in fear or pain. It's about reclaiming your agency and becoming the architect of your own mental landscape. If you start with the mind, you'll begin to understand that the life you're living right now is not a reflection of immutable truth, but rather a reflection of your perception. And when that perception is healed, when the internal narrative shifts, the external world starts to respond in kind. That's not magic, that's simply applied psychology, coupled with profound philosophical insight, and grounded in the reality of how our minds shape our lives. You don't have to control the entire world to heal your life. You just have to reclaim the one thing that shapes every experience you'll ever have, your mind. And here's a fundamental truth you can't afford to ignore: the quality of your mind directly determines the quality of your life. Heal it, and everything begins to change, transforming your outlook, your relationships, and your potential. Finally, please like or subscribe to the Buddhist Doctrine channel for even more content. We live in a culture that often treats emotional pain as an inconvenience, something to be buried, minimized, or medicated away. We've been taught to fear vulnerability, to avoid discomfort at all costs, and to pathologize sadness as a weakness. But here's the uncomfortable truth, particularly for those over 40 who may have spent years suppressing their emotions: if you want to truly heal your life, you have to be willing to feel the pain you've spent years trying to avoid. There is simply no transformation without confrontation. Emotional pain, grief, shame, heartbreak, regret, deserves acknowledgement, not suppression. Let me be very precise here: pain is information. It tells you something crucial about who you are, what truly matters to you, and where something inside you has been violated, neglected, or lost. And if you ignore that message, if you suppress it consistently, you don't destroy the pain, you internalize it. It doesn't simply go away or fade with time, it becomes resentment. It becomes depression. It becomes anxiety, addiction, rage, or even a profound sense of numbness. You start acting it out in subtle, unconscious ways, without even realizing the source of your behaviors. The mind stubbornly stores what the heart refuses to process. Now, from a psychological perspective, this is called repression. The ego, your conscious self, pushes painful experiences out of awareness because they're too overwhelming to deal with in the moment. And that makes sense, especially in childhood when you lack the cognitive and emotional tools to make sense of trauma or significant loss. But those repressed emotions don't disappear. They live in your unconscious, shaping how you react, how you relate, how you love, or how you fear love. Carl Jung famously called this the shadow, the parts of yourself that you've disowned because they felt too dangerous, too painful, or too shameful to face. You have to deeply understand that what you repress, you inevitably become enslaved to. If you never face the anger you buried as a child, it doesn't magically make you peaceful. It makes you passive-aggressive or chronically resentful. If you never grieve a lost relationship, you may start sabotaging new ones to protect yourself from feeling abandoned again. The emotions you suppress eventually become the architects of your own suffering, shaping your choices and limiting your potential for joy and fulfillment. Let me tell you something else: your emotional pain is not random. It is specific. It is often inextricably tied to very early moments, pivotal relationships, and formative wounds that have shaped who you are today. These aren't just fleeting memories, they are psychological anchors. Until you revisit them, not to simply relive the pain, but to understand it, you remain a prisoner of the past, reacting to the present through the distorted lens of unhealed wounds. But here's the redemptive part: the very act of acknowledging emotional pain is, in itself, profoundly healing. The mind doesn't need you to be perfect, it needs you to be honest. When you allow yourself to feel sadness without distraction, to sit with your shame without judgment, you begin to integrate those fractured parts of yourself, bringing coherence to the self. And a coherent self is a powerful self, capable of navigating life's challenges with resilience and grace. This is why practices like journaling, therapy, deep conversations with trusted friends, and even storytelling matter so deeply. They give form to the formless, allowing you to see patterns you didn't see before and understand the narrative of your own life with greater clarity. You begin to realize that pain isn't the enemy, denial is. When you stop running from your pain, something remarkable happens: it stops chasing you. Now, this doesn't mean wallowing or indulging in self-pity. Feeling pain is not the same as becoming defined by it. It's about processing it, learning from it, and allowing it to transform you. And that requires courage and vulnerability. But the alternative, emotional stagnation, is far more costly. A life lived in emotional suppression is a life lived in quiet despair, a slow erosion of the soul. So, the next time you feel that discomfort rising in your chest, don't silence it. Don't numb it. Ask it what it's trying to teach you. Because behind every wound is a lesson, and behind every lesson is an invitation to grow, to heal, to become someone capable of living fully, not just surviving quietly. And here's the final thought: your pain is not the end of your story, it's the doorway to your transformation. Love is, without a doubt, one of the most powerful forces in human experience. It can elevate you to unimaginable heights of meaning, connection, and purpose. But it can also leave you devastated, wounded in ways that profoundly shape how you see yourself and how you move through the world. And this is the paradox: love can be both the wound and the remedy. Many people walk around today carrying unhealed love stories. They may not say it out loud, but something inside them still aches when they remember the person they lost, or worse, the person they never truly had. That ache isn't just sentimental nostalgia, it's psychological residue. When love goes wrong, when it's cut short, betrayed, or never fully expressed, it leaves a trace, a lingering impact that doesn't simply disappear with time. It lingers in the mind, insidiously forming beliefs about your worth, your capacity for trust, your ability to form intimate connections, and your inherent vulnerability. From a psychological point of view, early love experiences, especially the first deep emotional connection, become templates, shaping your internal working model of how love operates. If that experience ended in confusion or rejection, you may unconsciously develop a belief that love is inherently dangerous or that you're fundamentally unworthy of being loved. And here's where it gets more complex: you will likely reenact those beliefs in future relationships, not because you consciously want to suffer, but because the mind often seeks familiarity, not necessarily happiness. It seeks what it understands, even if that understanding is rooted in pain. This is why revisiting your personal love story is not just a sentimental exercise, it's a necessary confrontation with the beliefs you've built around human connection. The way you remember that first love, what you made it mean, how you integrated the loss or the longing, those things matter. They profoundly influence whether you open your heart again or build walls around it, and they determine whether you actively pursue connection or avoid it out of deep-seated fear. Love isn't just about romance, it's about how love as a fundamental force interacts with your entire psychology. Love has the potential to rewire the brain. Functional MRI scans show that emotional closeness lights up the same neural pathways as physical safety. We are, without a doubt, biologically wired to need connection. So, when love fails us, it's not just emotional, it's existential. It shakes the very foundations of who we are. But here's the transformative part: the same love that wounds us also offers the blueprint for healing. When you examine your pain through the lens of self-compassion, when you reframe your loss as a valuable lesson instead of a personal failure, something profoundly shifts. You stop seeing love as a looming danger to be avoided and start seeing it as a powerful force to be approached with wisdom and discernment. You realize that it wasn't the love itself that hurt you, it was the fear, the miscommunication, the unrealistic expectations, the unresolved wounds you brought into it. And now, armed with this awareness, you have the power to do it differently. Healing the mind requires revisiting those early chapters, not to dwell in them, but to understand them. Not to revive the past, but to reclaim your agency in the present. Because every time you heal a part of yourself that was shaped by a broken love, you make space for a deeper, truer love to emerge, both toward others and, crucially, toward yourself. And let's be honest, many people are afraid to love again, not because they don't believe in love, but because they haven't healed from the first time it broke them. But if you let that fear run your life, then the wound ultimately wins, and pain becomes the author of your future. You cannot live fully if you fear the very thing that makes life meaningful. Love will always involve risk. But a life without it is guaranteed suffering, a slow erosion of the soul. You heal your mind not by avoiding love, but by learning how to love with wisdom, courage, and open eyes. So here's the key insight to carry with you: the love that once hurt you can also be the path that heals you, but only if you're willing to face it, understand it, and let it grow you. Forgiveness is one of those words that people throw around a lot, especially in self-help circles, but very few actually understand what it truly means, let alone how to practice it in a way that leads to genuine healing. We often think of forgiveness as something we do for others, some kind of moral charity, a noble act of letting someone off the hook. But that's a fundamentally shallow view. True forgiveness is not primarily about letting others off the hook, it's about releasing yourself from the psychological burden of resentment. It's a radical act of mental liberation. You see, when someone wrongs you, whether it's through betrayal, neglect, humiliation, or outright abandonment, it doesn't just hurt in the moment, it plants something inside you. If that injury is not properly processed and resolved, it festers, and you start carrying it with you like a heavy weight, often unconsciously. And over time, that weight distorts your emotional world, turning into bitterness, mistrust, chronic anger, or passive despair. You might tell yourself that you've moved on, but neurologically and emotionally, the experience still lives inside you, shaping your reactions and limiting your potential for authentic connection. From a psychological perspective, unforgiveness is a form of self-imprisonment. You become tethered to the event, to the person, and to the identity of the one who was hurt. That identity can be seductive, it makes you feel morally superior, justified in your pain. But it also keeps you trapped in the past, remaining reactive rather than truly free. Jung would argue that in clinging to resentment, you inadvertently feed your shadow. The darker, less conscious parts of yourself grow stronger because they are fueled by an unresolved emotional charge. And here's something most people don't realize: forgiveness is not always about reconciliation. You can forgive someone and still choose to never see them again. You can forgive a partner, a parent, or a friend without condoning what they did or minimizing the damage they caused. Forgiveness doesn't erase the wound, it transforms your relationship to it. It gives you sovereignty over your own mental and emotional space. One of the most important aspects of forgiveness is recognizing that it often has very little to do with the other person, it's fundamentally an internal process. The other person doesn't even need to apologize. In fact, many never will. But if your healing depends on their remorse, you've essentially given them control over your future. That's not strength, that's emotional dependency disguised as justice. Let's be clear, true forgiveness, especially in cases of deep betrayal, requires tremendous strength. It means confronting your pain, not bypassing it. It means grieving what was lost and accepting what will never be repaired. And, most importantly, it means taking back responsibility, not for what happened to you, but for how you carry it forward. This is not weakness, it's the highest form of psychological maturity. To forgive is to say, this pain no longer gets to define me. And that declaration is what creates space in the mind for something new, new love, new clarity, new possibilities. You stop being a prisoner of the past and become the architect of your future. And perhaps most radically, forgiveness must also be extended inward. Many people can't move forward because they haven't forgiven themselves for staying too long in a harmful situation, for missing the warning signs, for not being stronger, or simply for being vulnerable. But healing doesn't come from self-condemnation, it comes from self-compassion. It comes from recognizing that you did the best you could with the awareness you had at the time. That doesn't mean excusing everything, it means understanding it so you can outgrow it. So let's stop thinking of forgiveness as a gift you give someone else. It's not, it's a key. And that key doesn't unlock their freedom, it unlocks yours. Here's what it comes down to: you can carry the heavy weight of what hurt you, or you can choose to set it down and walk forward. But you simply can't do both. One of the greatest illusions that modern people live under is the idea that they can think their way into healing. That if they just read enough books, analyze enough data, or intellectualize enough experiences, they'll eventually sort everything out and achieve inner peace. And while insight is undoubtedly important, healing is not purely a cognitive process, it's deeply embodied. It requires more than just knowing, it requires living differently. This is where discipline comes in, not as a form of punishment or self-denial, but as a framework for structure and support. A mind in chaos cannot heal effectively in an environment of chaos. It needs order, it needs rhythm, and it needs practices that consistently reinforce clarity, strength, and stability over time. Now, when I say discipline, I don't mean rigid control or obsessive perfectionism. I mean a conscious commitment to daily habits that align your life with your core values and with the reality of your own well-being. The truth is, your nervous system doesn't respond to occasional breakthroughs or fleeting moments of insight, it responds to repetition, to patterns, to consistent behavior. Your brain changes through a process called neuroplasticity. Repeated thoughts, behaviors, and choices gradually create new neural pathways, strengthening the connections that support those patterns. That means if you're serious about healing your life, you need to take responsibility not just for what you feel in any given moment, but for what you do consistently, day in and day out. The philosopher Aristotle famously said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. And that applies to mental and emotional health just as much as it applies to any other area of life. If you want a stronger, more resilient mind, you need to cultivate stronger, more resilient patterns. If you desire inner peace, you have to actively stop practicing chaos. That's why daily rituals, journaling, regular exercise, meditation, prayer, meaningful conversations with loved ones, are not optional luxuries, they're essential. They anchor the self, creating psychological predictability in a world that constantly pulls your attention in 1,000 different directions. The problem is that many people underestimate the long-term cost of not having structure in their lives. They often tell themselves, "I'll get to it when I feel better." But that's not how the mind typically works. You don't wait to feel motivated to act, you act, and the action itself creates the motivation. Discipline precedes emotional clarity, not the other way around. Let's take a simple, yet crucial example: sleep. Chronic sleep deprivation doesn't just make you tired, it distorts your cognition, inflames your emotions, weakens your immune system, and amplifies anxiety. You can't simply talk your way out of that state, you need discipline. You need a consistent bedtime, a relaxing wind-down routine, and a deep respect for your own biology. The same principle applies to your dietary choices, your level of physical activity, and your amount of screen time. These may seem like minor details, but they are, in fact, the very architecture of your daily reality. If you consciously build your days with care and intention, your mind becomes a safer, more supportive place to live in. But here's the deeper truth: discipline is also, fundamentally, a spiritual practice. It is a declaration of what you believe you're truly worth. Because no one consistently creates structure and order for something they don't genuinely value. If you believe you are worthy of healing, worthy of peace, and worthy of a fulfilling life, then your calendar and your daily habits should consistently reflect that belief. If they don't, you're likely lying to yourself, subtly undermining your own well-being. Healing isn't about passively waiting for someone to rescue you, it's about actively showing up for yourself every single day with integrity, whether you feel like it or not. And that brings up another crucial point: feelings are not always reliable indicators of truth. Just because you feel hopeless doesn't mean you are inherently hopeless. Just because you feel broken doesn't mean you are incapable of functioning. Discipline allows you to act from principle, not solely from emotion. It creates a stable floor from which deeper healing can consistently emerge. So, no, this isn't glamorous work, it's not always profound or particularly poetic. Sometimes, it's simply doing the right thing, again and again, quietly and consistently, even when no one else sees you doing it. But that's how you reclaim your power. That's how you tell your mind, we're building something better now. And here's the challenge I leave you with: if you truly want to change your life, start by mastering your day. Because healing isn't typically found in the extraordinary, it's built in the ordinary, repeated with devotion. There inevitably comes a point in every journey of healing where you must consciously stop leaning backward into the past and start looking forward into the future, not out of denial or avoidance, but out of sheer necessity. You simply cannot create a meaningful and fulfilling life if your entire focus remains solely on the wound. There is, undoubtedly, a time for deeply understanding your pain, a time for grieving it, and a time for carefully integrating it into your personal narrative. But then, there must come a time when you make a conscious decision to live from a place of purpose, rather than solely from a place of trauma. That's where the real, transformative change truly begins. Too many people get caught in what we might call a psychological loop, a seemingly endless cycle of self-examination, perpetual emotional processing, and constant recycling of past experiences. And while introspection is undoubtedly important, it becomes counterproductive when it lacks a clear destination or a forward-moving trajectory. Healing is not the ultimate goal, it is simply the essential foundation from which you actively pursue your real goal: to live a life that truly means something to you, a life that consistently pulls you toward your highest potential, a life deliberately oriented around something far greater than your own suffering. Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, powerfully wrote that, "What man needs is not a tensionless state, but rather a worthwhile struggle, not comfort, but purpose." He astutely observed that the people most resilient to unimaginable suffering were those who were able to find a deep sense of meaning within it. And that's the key insight: meaning doesn't erase suffering, it ultimately redeems it. When you begin to serve something beyond your own emotional survival, when you actively contribute, create, mentor, or build something of value, then your pain gradually stops being the center of your story. It becomes part of the background, part of the texture of your character, but no longer its sole definition. From a psychological standpoint, this is what true integration ultimately looks like. You stop being fragmented and begin becoming whole, bringing your wounds with you, but no longer allowing them to be in charge. You are no longer a helpless victim of your life's circumstances, you are, instead, its conscious author. That fundamental shift doesn't happen overnight, it happens when you start making choices consistently aligned with meaning instead of merely with mood. When you stop primarily asking yourself, "How do I feel today?" and start asking, "What needs to be done?" This is where deliberate action matters far more than simply intellectual insight. If you truly want to heal your life, you need a clearly defined mission, something to actively orient yourself around. It doesn't have to be grand or world-changing, it could be showing up for your children with greater presence and patience, building something tangible with your hands, or helping someone else navigate through what you yourself have already survived. But it has to be real, and it has to matter enough to you that you're willing to consciously organize your life around it. Meaning, by its very nature, is inherently demanding. It will inevitably ask you to sacrifice comfort, to cultivate discipline, to embrace courage, and to confront the inevitable chaos of life with unwavering intention and order. That's what true maturity looks like. It's not the absence of struggle, but the ability to carry that struggle with dignity because it's inextricably tied to something worthwhile. And when you find that, when you dedicate your life to something that truly matters, your mind inevitably begins to settle, not because everything suddenly becomes easy, but because you are no longer lost or adrift. We live in a time where distraction is pervasive. Entertainment, constant outrage, and addictive behaviors have all become modern substitutes for a sense of purpose. And while they may keep you temporarily numb, they will never truly make you whole. Wholeness comes from actively doing what is deeply meaningful, even when it's difficult, and especially when it's difficult. That's the moment where you truly earn your healing. When you stop constantly asking life to get easier and start asking yourself to become stronger. So the final question is this: now that you've faced your pain, what will you actively build with it? Because healing is, without a doubt, not the end of your story, it's merely the beginning of your next chapter.